Jennifer, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We've worked together for a long time and we know each other well. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to join you for this podcast.
For those who don't know you, I would describe you as a leading voice on shaping culture and employer branding. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about the different enterprises that you've built and what they do and a little bit about you.
Okay. So I created the recruitment business a few years ago. We then grew by acquisition. So we acquired Service Bureau and then we became Adecco to further grow in terms of partnership with Proman Group to become Proactive Talent Solutions. So still part of an international group, but working locally for our clients. So recruitment is one of my core business. The second is training, where we have chosen to specialize on engagement with my company called Engage Solutions, where we focus our efforts on culture, because this is where you can change things for retention and attraction of talent. So employer brand is the specialty of Engage amongst leadership training, coaching, psychometric testing, and we have also consulting services on Engage.
I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about what you do in terms of employer branding, EVP, and all that. The podcast aims at exploring how we can enhance our communication in business. It's not just what we say, but also how we say it. This episode focuses on how we protect the energy in the room, how we protect the space for others to be able to express themselves without fear, especially when there is someone else in the room who is making it a bit difficult for that to happen. And in every episode, I share a bit of my courtroom experience, a particular story, and then we'll take it from there. And we found a bunch of ideas, and it'd be interesting to hear what you think, how you think this story resonates in the business environment.
Okay.
The story that we shared today is about a situation where my client was a witness being cross-examined in court. Cross-examination is part of every trial where the witness gives evidence and then the lawyer for the other party, the opposing party, puts questions to the witness. This story already happened a few years ago, and I was working for a client who's in high-level management, very well-respected, a person in the industry, carries themselves really well, are very calm and composed, and I have no doubt they would be able to depose well in court. They are very well-spoken, and I started the trial by asking the questions to help them tell their story, what happened, what did not happen. They did very well. And then the next part was all the cross-examination. So the other lawyer stands up and starts putting questions. And the other lawyer I know is quite loud and tends to want to come across as being intimidating. And I already told that to a client. You don't have to worry about that. You just go straight to your answers and don't let that get to you. And as expected, the other lawyer started interrupting him every time and talking over him, raising his voice. And at some point, within minutes of the cross-examination, I could see that something is not going right. That person who used to be calm and composed and speak very well suddenly changed and started mumbling, I could see the face turned red completely, and started also raising his voice in response to the other lawyer who was raising his voice. And I could see the frustration. And at some point, the witness just froze for a few minutes, couldn't find words, was so confused. Perhaps I'll pause here. I'll get back to that story and tell you what I did, but I felt that I had to intervene to protect the witness. But in that moment, the question running through my eyes, how do I do it? Because if I intervene and say, my lord friend is being rude and disrespectful, it will just open another discussion and the tension will go even higher. And more importantly, it doesn't put my witness in a more comfortable position. I want him to calm down. I don't want him to to see another confrontation between me and the other lawyer and the court. So I had to think really hard about how do I bring the temperature down and make him feel at ease without it being too obvious. That's what I was doing. Let's come to your experience in employer branding and establishing culture in the workplace, in an organization. How is psychological safety important? How does it result in enhancing productivity in the workplace?
The figures show that this is one of the most important factors in productivity and performance today. And this is what's the most lacking in organizations. There are a lot of articles of our Business Review, McKinsey, where this is the scope for improvement our organizations have to focus their energy on. What is psychological safety is simply the capacity for an individual to be expressing positive or negative feelings with his teammates, being free to do that, and being comfortable to do that. And in most organizations, we don't see that as natural. And it's really something you must build in the culture. And psychological safety is definitely the one thing about culture we have to improve today.
I agree with you. I mean, in my courtroom story, if I go back to it, the reason why I said I didn't feel that I should intervene forcefully just then is because it wouldn't make the witness feel psychologically safe. Because if I raise my voice as well and say that I object strongly to the way that the other lawyer is cross-examining, it just brings more tension in the room. And when I said it within minutes, I could see my client's face turn red. For me, that's the productivity of the witness going down, because the witness froze. The witness is not giving the answers that he should be given. The quality of his testimony in court suffers because he doesn't feel safe, and he feels almost being mocked and being laughed at by the other lawyer. So in a business environment, what are the things you do to almost immediately change the tone? If I can put a different question. Have you been in situations where the meeting is going very well, or an employee is very productive, performing very well? There's a sudden change, maybe a change in management style, a change in their reporting line, or something that changes, and they mirror that change. Like in my situation, the witness started mirroring the loud tone of the other lawyer.
Yes, it does. In communication, I think words are empty without emotions. Emotions make words alive in a way. And what people will take away from a moment, from a communication, whatever the moment is, will be not only how they perceived you felt, but how you made them feel. Yeah. There's a great quote about Maya Angelou about that. So always remember that the takeaway you leave someone is how you made them feel emotionally. That's why it's so important in terms of productivity. And that's why actually, for example, recognition fosters bigger motivation than reward, because that's a driver of, encouragement that definitely delivers on results. So I think to go back to your point, I think it's a matter of creating a culture. And there's a brilliant example. The best I've read was about Netflix. Netflix supersedes Google and others with, I think, there's a measure to calculate the return on culture investment. They reach figures like 3 million per head per employee. I have it in an article. I can share it in the link of your podcast.
Yes.
Very interesting. 3 million per employee as return on culture investment, because culture is quantified. And what they have as unique and signature in their culture is really a culture of open feedback, culture of feedback. They tell their employees, whatever you have to say, no matter what it is about, don't go online and talk about it. Feel free to talk about it in the organization, in whatever space you are comfortable to share that. We are open to taking it. So this makes a difference in terms of results of the organization as well. So case studies are quite clear about your power of culture and return on culture investment. And communication plays a key role in that.
And let's flip it. If I know you're saying that if you invest in culture, it shows in productivity and in the way the organization is being run. But what happens when you don't invest?
But when you don't invest in culture, you still have a culture, but we call it a culture by default, not by design. When you start working on a culture by design, this is when you have the opportunity and an open window to bring in your values.
Right.
What we see on the walls, but for real. Values is only true in actions. So it doesn't make sense to have just values on the wall. So when you want to have a culture by design, it's a matter of opening a door for values and actionable values. So how your behaviors are going to reflect your values. That's the key element.
Exactly. I think the danger in having a culture by default is that there's significant risk. That is not the culture that you want.
Yes.
And that's why I said, if I let the other lawyer continue with the style of questioning, that would also reflect in the answers that my witnesses is giving. And I see the same thing in business. I mean, I do a lot of business disputes. I see situations where business partners are getting along really well. And in most cases, business partners, go into the business together thinking it's going to be a dream marriage, not looking at the risks and all. And then at some point, there is one email that gets sent and with maybe a wrong tone in it, and it gets read. It's interpreted in the wrong way. And then there's no conversation to redress it. Someone just, says, it's what's under deliberation, we're not going to address it. Maybe that person had a bad day. And then you have a second incident, have a conversation. These are small incidents, but they snowball into a bigger issue because it affects the culture, the relationship between the parties who don't address this. And eventually it mirrors the other, it's the person on the receiving end mirrors the tone and the culture that the other person is bringing.
Yeah.
And that then snowballs into a big dispute between partners and shareholders and one way want to split.
Exactly.
The business.
It's true that even in a culture by default mode company, if you don't take care of your culture, you are showing and mirroring that you have a culture that you don't care for.
Yeah.
And it backfires because the culture will be a culture where managers don't care as well. So what we also observe is the culture is a mirror of the leader or the leadership team. And there has to be awareness around that and more conscious efforts. We've seen, for example, in our surveys on EVP that the most memorable moment of many employees' career is where their CEOs came and gave recognition or had a chat with them. We have people in some industries, like we are currently working for companies in the sugarcane industry, agriculture. Employees have 48 years of service. That's a lot. That's a lifetime, right? And those kind of things are precious. Your old employees is the story your company has to tell. It's the identity of your business. And they know all the ins and outs. They know better than the leaders because they've seen so many of them, And this is where you see the most maturity in cultures is when you have those long years of service. And this is something to cherish for organizations.
When preparing for this podcast, I came upon a book called Emotional Contagion. And one thing that strikes me in the book is how to explain that people unconsciously mimic the emotional states of and behaviors of people they're dealing with, especially of the leaders, especially the people who are the authority.
You can see it with parents and children as a natural response when someone, and I was told by one of my managers in the past that when someone speaks loud, you go lower in your tone.
Yeah.
And this is a way to address conflict. Of course, on the moment, you don't always have it's not natural to do that, but it has to become more conscious as a reaction.
That's interesting. And I think that's where I want to go in our conversation is how do you reset the tone, And you already kind of started there. When someone goes loud, you go lower.
Always.
You can only do that if you manage your own emotional state.
Yeah. I think the key to a lot of things we see happening in organizations as far as communication is concerned is self-awareness. You have to know yourself better than you can attempt to pretend to know others. And that's the first milestone, knowing yourself, self-awareness, and being aware and facing who you are and your behaviors firsthand. You have to master that. Once you have that self-awareness, a lot of good things unlock.
There's another book that I really like. It's called Becoming Bulletproof. And the way they address it, the recommendation backed by a lot of research is you don't match the energy of the other person. You set your energy,
yes,
and you let them adjust to yours. And one of the ways is, for example, by lowering your tone, your voice, slowing the pace, and even silence sometimes.
Yes, we undermine the power of silence a lot, and the tone is something we see in interviews. You were showcasing in your case study earlier that when people are in difficult situations, they mimic. So in interviews, the more you have it informal, the more you get to learn about the person in front of you. And that's the art of interview. It's not about having a board of, imagine an interviewee going in a boardroom for an interview with 7 members of the panel. This is the least effective way of interview. It's intimidating for the candidate. No matter how extrovert you are, it doesn't work. And what do you get in that moment? Exactly the opposite of what you want, which is the least truthful behavior. And, you don't get to learn the truth about the person and who that person is. Yeah. But meet that person in a coffee restaurant somewhere, or one-to-one in the same room, you get altogether another result. So if your goal in an interview, exactly like in a courtroom, is to have the truth about someone and have an idea of who that person is, then the approach must be more one-to-one, more human than formal.
That's interesting. What I hear from you is there's a lot of, you would avoid meetings that are formal or super formal. Of course, you can't always avoid.
You can't do without
those. Yes, you can't do without them. But as far as possible, you would prefer informal environments. But even in informal environments, you can have one person who says something and rubs the person the wrong way, and it shuts them down.
Yeah, it can happen.
And then, I mean, that's the focus of our discussion today. How do we reset the tone? And as I go back to my courtroom stories, I know that I set up with a pause and now to come back to it. So in my courtroom story, as I told you, I could see the witness was not going to be very productive in that exercise. And the first thing I had to do was keep my cool and remind myself I'm not going to object strongly to my learned friend's style of questioning. As I've said, it would not be beneficial for the witness if I go down that rabbit hole. So then the way I addressed it, I had every time that the lawyer was interrupting and speaking over the witness, I calmly stood up and said, and asked the judge, would it be okay if the witness is just given a bit more time? Would it be okay if the witness takes the time that they need to answer the question? And in other words, I was basically saying that, can my friend stop interrupting? But it was said in a way that wasn't confrontational. I could be confrontational. It's my job, but it doesn't necessarily help my witness if I am in that specific moment. And in the end, not only did my witness feel more comfortable, but also the lawyer on the other side started slowing down because they mimic our emotional state to us.
Yeah.
It takes one person to bring the room back to the right energy, to have the right energy in the room. I wanted to reflect on this. There's a need to protect. For me, there was a need to protect a witness. In business, there's a need to protect employees. Where do we draw the line between protecting and overprotecting? And the reason I'm asking this is because this is something that I was thinking of in that moment, because I didn't want to come across as being overprotective, bearing in mind that I was representing someone in high-level management, somebody who speaks well, should be able to defend himself, should be able to stand up for himself against somewhat big groups. And I wanted the judge to get that impression also to get, because that goes to the credibility of the person, the personality of the witness. And I had to tread very, very carefully on how I'm going to help a person, but without
Overdoing it,
but also taking it from them. I want to allow them as well to be able to be able to stand up for themselves.
Yeah, I think the limit of excessive protection would certainly be where too much protection is going to be perceived as something else. Like I had a coach always reminding me that too much passion can be perceived as aggressivity by your teams. We don't realize that the excess of passion can be perceived that way. So in the same context, too much protection is when it's perceived that, as something else, whatever it could be, but something negative. Okay. So I think that's where you have to draw the line.
I'll wrap up quite soon, but there was one thing I wanted to ask, because I know that you do a lot of work across generations, if I can put it that way. And because I think we've discussed this before. I asked you a bit earlier, there's a line between protecting and overprotecting, because of course you also have confidence that people are resilient. They're able to stand for themselves in certain situations. Let's talk about Gen Z. Do you think there's a difference among generations in how they react to a tone being raised or being disrespected? Or do you think there's a difference that certain generations would let it go, certain wouldn't accept it at all?
Definitely, when we put it in a family context, we can all relate to family. Our grandparents are the wisest and most patient with our kids, right? They are the best parents. They are exploring their second chance of being parents, right? This is how our grandparents see it. And they do it with a lot more patience than we do. And the outcome is our kids love them, right? They prefer sometimes to be at their grandparents than to be at home with mom and dad. I had a friend who used to have, just sharing a joke, who used to say, when my kids are going to be naughty, as a punishment, I'll tell them you go to Roger's and Jennifer's house for the weekend, and you will see you make them come back walking straight in the house. And we tend to be very strict. We don't negotiate. We don't have the same patience. We have our reasons, right? We are not to blame. We are also an output of our lifestyle, right? It's not that we wake up wanting to be that way. We would love to have as much patience with our kids than our grandparents, but for sure, definitely kids, you have to have more patience with them. And old people tend to do that better. So I think it is generational. And Gen Z for me is no more important than Gen X or Gen Y, which is actually Gen Y is the majority of the workforce today. And I think you have to address each generation with their needs, but there's a kind of a natural ecosystem that comes in place. Look at the family, the grandparents for things that parents can't do, and they are friends for what parents cannot do as well. And you just have to ensure that the environment, exactly like culture, that the environment enables space for your kids to see their friends, to see their grandparents, and to spend time with you. So with that ecosystem, no matter what generation, they will find their connections, the anchors.
The reason I ask is because sometimes you've got meetings where you've got people from different backgrounds, different generations. And you think you're dealing with, you're in a meeting with different people and the message is being heard in a different way. Somebody might think, oh, that was not harsh at all. And someone else might think that was so disrespectful. How could that person say that? And they take it so personally. And of course, you've got people who it wouldn't matter when, it doesn't matter to them whether it's hard or not. And that's something I often observe in court, especially in terms of who's against me in court. If the lawyer is younger or in a certain bracket in terms of age, I kind of can gauge how I'm going to, what my approach is going to be in court, how it's going to be taken by. There are some lawyers I know very well, and we often appear against each other. We're very good friends, same peer group or same sort of age group. But in court, we're as fierce as we need to be.
Yes.
I know that person it's not going to take it personally. We are on the same page in terms of how we would perceive it. But I know that there are people who wouldn't.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying, I think even in a business environment, sometimes you've got tough conversations.
Yes.
And you need to have the tough conversations. You can't sugarcoat things.
And it's essential as well in the context of, let's pick a meeting again, to have the ability in your communication to be, I don't know if it's a good word in English, but eloquent, to be éloquent, comme on dit in French, with each person in that room. And those are the best communicators that change the world. And they get the results. And for that to happen, you need to be interested in becoming better at communication. That has to become the key skill you want to groom for yourself. And that's where you talk to an audience. In trading, we have to do that. So I've learned that. You learn the visual, the audited, the ones who listen, the one who must feel things, and you tell stories. I always remember my NLP days where my coach used to say, okay, you're taking a plane. The plane is going up in the sky. You reach Rodrigue. You walk in the lemon cellars and you pick up a lemon and you smell the lemon and you touch the lemon and you take off the skin and you get all the feelings. So, someone visual can connect to that. And in a story, you can connect to people in a deeper way. And that gets, you can learn that. But you have to know that you have to learn to communicate in the first place, right? Well, so that's key.
Hopefully the podcast is going to be a good tool for people who want to just hear, experiences in the workplace and business environment, in court, all revolving around communication. You said that you admire people, some of the best communicators through communication have been able to change the world. And one question I ask every guest at the end of the podcast is, who inspires you as a good communicator?
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I think Barack Obama is an excellent communicator, and I'll tell you why. He has built his communication campaign around positive statements. And for me, this is the way communication is efficient and brings results.
What was his slogan? Was it "Yes, we can"?
Yes, we can. Yeah, that just illustrates the positivity of the communication, and being able to communicate with positivity is a game changer, I think. Yeah. And seeing opportunity rather than problems. It shows a lot about mindset, and it rallies people together.
Jennifer, I've very much enjoyed
likewise
with you. It's always an interesting topic, talking about communication and people culture and all that. Thanks very much for
pleasure. Thank you for having me.